So most people know Wolfsbane as this shy Scottish mutant who can turn herself into a wolf, but the reality is Rahne Sinclair's mutation is far more complicated than that. Over the years, her lycanthropy has been changed, broken, and rewritten more times than almost any other X-Men's powers. She's been turned into a mindless Genoshan mutate, she's developed new mutations, she's fallen in love with an Asgardian wolf prince, and once, she even unknowingly tore apart the man who raised her. So today, we're going to be breaking down Wolfsbane's bestial anatomy, from how her transformation actually works to how her body changed throughout her life and why the line between Rahne Sinclair and the beast inside has never truly been safe. It's going to be a good one, so let's get right into it. What exactly happens to Rahne Sinclair's body when she transforms? Rahne Sinclair's mutant ability is a form of lycanthropy that lets her transform between 3 different states. These 3 states are her fully human form, her fully wolf form, and a transitional half-wolf hybrid form. She can consciously choose which form she wants to take under normal circumstances. Her mutation actually differs a lot from a traditional werewolf, as Wolfsbane isn't a supernatural wolf and wasn't cursed, so her characteristics differ a lot. Her powers actually come from her X gene, which makes her mutation entirely biological. She's not tied to the full moon curse, and she doesn't share any other classic werewolf weaknesses like silver. Rahne's most recognizable form is her transitional or half-wolf form, and in this state, she has a mix of both human and wolf traits. She can still walk upright and use her hands normally, and even talk, but at the same time, her body grows thick fur, sharp claws, and long fangs. Her strength, speed, agility, and reflexes increase significantly, while her sense of smell, hearing, and sight become much sharper than an ordinary human being. Despite all these physical changes, Rahne still keeps her human mind, memories, and intelligence, which allows her to think and act like she normally would. Rahne can also transform completely into a wolf, and this form offers her greater speed, stealth, tracking ability, and animal mobility than her human form. Although she used to lose the ability to speak in this form, she retained her human mind, memories, and self-awareness. But these 3 forms are only the foundation of Rahne's mutation, and while they seem straightforward at first, each transformation involves major anatomical changes to her skeleton, muscles, senses, and instincts. How did Rahne's mutation first manifest, and why did it nearly get her killed? Rahne Sinclair grew up in Scotland after she was adopted by the strict Reverend Cragg. Cragg was a religious fundamentalist who believed that mutants were servants of evil, and because of that, Rahne was raised with constant fear and taught to believe that anything unnatural was sinful. Rahne's mutant powers first manifested when she hit puberty, and her ability to transform into a wolf terrified both Rahne and the people around her. Of course, Reverend Cragg believed her transformation was the result of a demonic possession rather than a mutant ability. After witnessing Rahne's transformation firsthand, Cragg gathered an angry mob to hunt her down. Rahne transformed into her wolf form and tried to escape, but unfortunately, she was shot and badly wounded while running away. Thankfully, Dr. Moira McTaggart found Rahne before it was too late. Moira rescued her, helped treat her injuries, and eventually became her legal guardian. Moira later introduced Rahne to Professor X, and Rahne became one of the founding members of the New Mutants. From the very beginning, Rahne's mutation was treated like a curse instead of a natural part of who she was. Before anyone could even teach her how to understand or control her changing body, she was hunted down simply because she could transform into a wolf. That experience left a deep impact on Rahne and also shaped the way she saw her mutation for many years, which affected both her mind and body. Why does Wolfsbane get physically stronger and faster the more wolf-like she becomes? Every time Rahne transforms into a werewolf, her abilities get stronger. Each stage of her transformation increases her strength, speed, agility, reflexes, and her overall physical performance. Her full wolf form actually gives her the greatest animal abilities, while her human form just has a few enhancements that differ from regular human beings. But becoming more wolf-like also comes with certain drawbacks, as when she shifts into her wolf form, she loses the ability to perform precise tasks with her hands. Also, in her full wolf form, she could no longer speak due to her wolf anatomy, even though she could still retain her human mind. Rahne's senses become much sharper in both her transitional and full wolf forms. Her sense of smell, hearing, and sight became far superior to that of an ordinary human. She could even detect infrared and ultraviolet light, follow scent trails that even trained trackers would struggle with, and she was also able to identify a person's emotions through their scent, body heat, and other subtle physical changes. Unlike many mutants, Wolfsbane's mutation isn't just a single power she can switch on whenever she wants. Whenever she transforms, her entire body changes. Her muscles become stronger, and so do her senses, and even the way she moves changes depending on her form. Each transformation comes with its own strengths and weaknesses, so instead of simply becoming more powerful, she has to adapt to the abilities and limitations of the form she's using. Over time, Rahne did learn to control these natural transformations and uses them to her advantage, but her mutation didn't stay the same forever. Later on, outside forces would begin changing her body in ways she never chose, which led to one of the biggest evolutions of her power during Genosha experiments. How did Genosha turn Wolfsbane's body into a weapon she couldn't control? Rahne's life changed dramatically during the Extinction Agenda storyline. Genosha was a small island nation that tested every citizen for mutant genes, and if anyone tested positive, they became property of the state. What actually made Genosha terrifying was that they weren't just trying to destroy mutants, they were actually looking forward to turning them into tools. Mutants were treated as property, and their abilities were seen as something that the government could control and weaponize as well. For Rahne, this was really cruel because her transformation had always been a struggle, and Genosha didn't just take away her freedom, it actually took away her ability to decide what her body could become. And that's how we came to learn that the Genoshan magistrates had captured Storm and several other new mutants, including Wolfsbane. After capturing them, the Gene-Engineer transformed the captured mutants into mutates. This was basically a process where the mutants were brainwashed, stripped of their free will, and their powers were modified so they'd obey Genosha without any question. Sadly, Rahne was subjected to this mutate process, which led her to permanently being trapped in her wolf form, and she could no longer change back into her human body. Rahne remaining in her wolf form was the only way she could hold on to some of her own identity and resist complete mental control. Isn't it ironic how the transformation she once controlled became the very prison she could no longer escape? In fact, even her own mutation was turned against her. Although Rahne eventually did escape Genosha and slowly began recovering from the trauma, the experience left permanent scars on both her mind and mutation. What is Wolfsbane's biggest feat of power? There are actually a few moments that could take that title. There was the time she tore through Hulk-resistant ammo belts with nothing but her claws, and there's the time she managed to kill an astral projection. The reason that particular accomplishment rates so highly is because her powers were never based around the idea of physical strength. Instead, her powers are about the connection that exists between her body and her mind, and how these two aspects of her experience weren't working together. But today, we're going to be focusing on the one feat that revealed the most about how Rahne's mutation actually worked. Because while those moments showcase just how dangerous she is in combat, this one showed how terrifying her powers became when the line between her human mind and animal instincts completely disappeared. While Rahne was serving on Wolverine's Black Ops X-Force team, her abusive father, Reverend Craig, returned. He was involved in some anti-mutant conspiracy, and he used psychological conditioning in an attempt to turn Rahne against her own teammates. Rahne had lived with the unsettling fear of the wolf she discovered within her after unlocking her powers. While some mutants revel in their new abilities, Rahne recognized that the force of her transformation meant it needed to be controlled at all times. The more she succumbed to her instincts, the more she feared losing her humanity completely. But the Reverend's conditioning sort of backfired, and instead of controlling Rahne, it completely suppressed her human mind, which led to her animal instincts taking over, and that left her acting purely on instinct. When X-Force eventually found Rahne, she was covered in blood and surrounded by shredded clothing. Rahne had actually killed and consumed Reverend Craig. I mean, imagine that. But when she regained control of herself, the memory of what had happened was completely wiped away. This moment wasn't impressive because of how much she could lift or how hard she could hit. It was impressive because it demonstrated the absolute limit of her mutation. It showed what would happen if her human consciousness completely disappeared, leaving only her wolf side behind. Rahne's anatomy exists on a spectrum between human restraint and animal instinct, and this was the very moment that that balance was entirely broken. This is what makes Wolfsbane different compared to a standard werewolf. It's not just about the transformation becoming dangerous, the danger exists in the potential scenario that one day, the power of the wolf in Rahne's mind would surpass her abilities to control it. How did an Asgardian pregnancy push Wolfsbane's biology somewhere no other X-Man has gone? One of the strangest chapters in Rahne's life began when she met Rimhari, the Asgardian Wolf Prince. Over the years, they developed an on-again, off-again romantic relationship, but what initially started as an unlikely romance eventually led to one of the most unusual moments in New Mutant history. And by that I mean, Rahne became pregnant with Rimhari's child. Because the baby was a magical Asgardian mutant hybrid, it developed at an unnaturally speedy rate, and that rapid pregnancy actually began to threaten Rahne's life. Since Rahne's life was on the line, Rimhari turned to Hela, the Asgardian goddess of death, for help. He made a bargain to save both Rahne and their unborn child. The birth itself was a magically speedy delivery rather than a typical human pregnancy. And from that came their son Tyr, who looked much more like a wolf than a human. This caused Rahne to struggle further with her animal instincts as a mother, but Tyr was actually far more than just a human Asgardian hybrid. He was eventually revealed to be a mystical nexus point that multiple Hell Lords wanted to take control of. Unfortunately, this made him the center of a deadly conflict which would ultimately cost him his life. This wasn't just another strange mutation. Rahne's body had successfully carried and given birth to a magical Asgardian mutant hybrid, which was something no other X-Man has ever experienced. And by this point, her biology had gone far beyond the limits of any ordinary mutant, and that showed her that mutation wasn't the only thing that could shape her anatomy. Powerful supernatural forces were also capable of it. How did Wolfsbane die, and what does her death reveal about her whole story? One of the most tragic moments in Rahne's story was her untimely death. While she was trying to protect a woman who was being harassed by a group of men, Rahne instinctively bared her fangs for just a brief moment. That single glimpse was enough for the men to realize that she was a mutant, which set off the tragic chain of events that followed. That group of men reacted with fear and hatred after seeing her mutation, and then they simply beat Rahne to death because she was a mutant. Rahne's death quickly became a hot topic in the X-Men comics fandom. Many fans and critics felt that the dialogue and the way the scene unfolded was meant to reflect real-world violence against marginalized communities. Whether or not that was the writer's exact intention, the scene also sparked a great amount of discussion amongst readers. Rahne spent her entire life being judged and hunted because of what her body could become, and this began with her abusive father and the fearful mob that he turned against her. In the end, she was targeted simply for being different. So, as we can see, Rahne never got the peaceful life she truly deserved. Her story was always about the struggle between her humanity and the way others saw her mutation. Her death also serves as a tragic reminder that the greatest danger she ever faced wasn't her powers, it was the fear and hatred of the people around her. How did Krakoa's resurrection protocols bring Wolfsbane back, and is she still the same person? Like many other mutants, Rahne's story didn't really end with her death. During the Krakoa era, the mutant nation of Krakoa created a way to bring dead mutants back to life. They used a group of mutants known as the Five who were able to recreate a mutant's body and restore their mind using previously stored genetic and psychic backups. Rahne was eventually resurrected through this process, and she returned as part of the New Mutants era. She also became a citizen of Krakoa with many other resurrected mutants. Rahne's return sparked a lot of discussions among fans. While many were genuinely happy to see her return, others felt that it sort of took away some of the emotional impact of her tragic death. After all, with Krakoa's resurrection system, death was no longer a permanent issue for most X-Men characters. Even though Rahne's body was back, it raised an interesting question. Did she truly come back as the same person who lived through all that pain, or was this a fresh start for her? Throughout her life, Rahne's body had been shaped by mutation, magic, trauma, and even death itself. But her anatomy was never just about turning into a wolf, it was actually about the constant struggle between the human she wanted to become and the animal the world kept on forcing her to be. Perhaps this is why Wolfsbane remains one of the most tragic and fascinating mutants in the entire Marvel Universe. How does Wolfsbane's wolf form differ from a classic movie werewolf? Initially, Wolfsbane looked almost exactly like a traditional movie werewolf. She had fur, claws, fangs, heightened senses, and she could transform into a wolf-like creature. Due to this, many people just naturally assumed she was Marvel's version of a werewolf. But unlike classic werewolves, Rahne wasn't cursed. Nor did she need a full moon to transfer or have a weakness towards silver. Her transformations were simply caused by her mutant X gene, not by magic or lycanthropy. Unlike most werewolf movies, Rahne could also control her transformation, and she didn't need to adhere to a full moon routine. She also kept her intelligence and memories while transforming. Losing control was rare for Rahne when she transformed. In fact, she used to remain fully aware of who she was, and she could think and act just like she would in her human form. The few times she completely lost control were caused by things like severe trauma, brainwashing, or other outside influences, and not the transformation itself. This was actually a deliberate choice by Marvel. On the surface, Rahne's powers were just designed to resemble the werewolves from classic horror stories, but unlike those monsters, her transformations had always been explained through mutant biology and not supernatural causes. That unique mix allowed Wolfsbane to fit perfectly in both horror style and the world of the X-Men. But because Rahne looked like a monster, many people believed that she in fact was one. Even her own father saw her mutation as something evil instead of understanding what it really was. And that misunderstanding filled her life with fear, hatred, and abuse, which proved the greatest danger she ever faced wasn't her powers, but the way people chose to view them. Now, of course, there were moments when that line became much harder to see. During the Genoshan experiments, and later, during the tragedy involving Reverend Craig, Rahne had temporarily lost control of her human side, and her animal instincts took over completely. But even then, it's not like there was some supernatural curse. Those moments were actually caused by trauma, brainwashing, and extreme psychological stress, not by magic or werewolf mythology. So, after everything that we've covered, my answer is actually pretty simple. Wolfsbane wasn't really Marvel's version of a werewolf. She was a mutant whose biology just happened to resemble werewolf mythology. And once you get a grasp of that, you actually start to see her powers in a completely different way. She was never actually fighting a curse, she was just trying to live with the mutation she was born with.
Oh my God.
How do live action and modern comics versions compare in portraying her anatomy? Wolfsbane finally made her live-action debut in The New Mutants, where she was played by Maisie Williams. While the movie showcased her wolf transformations, it placed an even greater focus on Rahne's emotional trauma and the personal struggles that shaped her throughout her life, which made her story about much more than just her mutant power. Even though the film made a few changes, it stayed true to most of Rahne's important traits. She still had the ability to transform into different wolf forms, and the story continued to explore her strict religious upbringing, her loneliness, and her fear of being different. Those were always some of the biggest parts of Wolfsbane's character. The film focused on telling a smaller, more personal story instead of adapting her entire comic history, and because of that, like most comic adaptations, the movie simplified parts of her backstory. Some comic storylines were changed or left out entirely, but meanwhile, the comic book version of Rahne continued to evolve even after the movie ended. Following her resurrection during the Krakoa era, she returned to the mutant nation and continued her life with the X-Men. Even after everything she had been through, Rahne still carried the memories and experiences that had shaped her into the person she became. At their core, both versions of Wolfsbane shared the same mutation and the same transformations, but the comics actually took her anatomy even further, from exploring everything from magical influences and hybrid biology to new forms and even resurrection. The movie, on the other hand, focused less on expanding her powers and more on the emotional impact of living with her mutation. But it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the comics or the movie, the heart of Rahne's story never really changes. Throughout her life, Rahne's body was shaped by mutation, trauma, magic, experimentation, love, and even death. But despite everything she went through, she never stopped trying to hold on to her humanity. In the end, Wolfsbane's anatomy was never about becoming a wolf, it was just about trying to stay human in a world that never stopped treating her like a monster. Beneath the fur and association with werewolves, it becomes apparent that Wolfsbane has one clear story about anatomy, and really, it's more about autonomy. Everyone around her wants to control her and her body. Her father wanted to destroy it, Genoshan attempted to exploit it, and trauma took control of it. Magic, pregnancy, death, and even rebirth changed how her body functioned, However, throughout it all, Rahne Sinclair proved she wasn't evil or demonically impressed. She was just a human trying her best to keep her humanity with a wolf living inside her. That's all we got for you today, but we'd love to hear which character you want us to do an anatomy video on in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, because that's the best way to see more videos like it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.